Welcome to Focus today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and our special guest today is somebody I'm sure you've heard before, Chonda Pierce. We have played her audio tapes on the radio side of theDove for years. She writes books, she does albums, she works with the USO, she leaps tall buildings, she runs faster than a locomotive, and she's more funny than Steve Martin, Harvey Korman, and Tim Conway wrapped into one. Chonda Pierce is with us today. And
well, thank you for dating me with all those three guys.
Where are you?
Ellen or something young, skinny.
Where are you? What part of the country are you in?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville. I couldn't tell by the accent. Nice to have you, Chonda. Is it true that you're a cross between a Honda and a Chevette?
Yes. Haven't you done your little research? You know, it is just when you said someone who needs no introduction, I usually get that because of my voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't have a voice for radio or online, or it just kind of comes across whiny.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It certainly gets a lot of attention, no question about it.
I could get Muppet work.
Well,
I think I would make a really good Muppet. Not the Miss Piggy. She's a little bit of a sissy.
Yeah.
But I've got hips that are about that big. So.
Chonda,
I have a body for radio.
That a girl. Hey, a couple of things before we get into your new CD. Tell us about your ministry with Branches Recovery Center.
Oh, thanks for asking. You know, sometimes necessity is our greatest inspiration. I told my brother the other day, I want to think that this whole idea came from God. Let's go with that story. We both hit the road. I mean, we both hit the wall. And a lot of it we learned was we got, honestly, mental illness runs in our family. My father was bipolar growing up, which was very odd in a world that is not friendly to mental illness, or, you know, things that we don't understand. We usually find a verse against it.
Right.
And so, so my dad was also a very fire brimstone preacher. And so the rub of his illness and, you know, standing in a pulpit on Sunday was not always authentic and was not always equal. Yeah. And the man that I knew on sometimes Mondays and Tuesdays was a different man that other people knew on Sunday, and it made for a confusing childhood, coupled with the fact that as a teenage girl, I lost both sisters. One was killed in a car wreck when she was 20. One died with leukemia when she was 15, and my parents divorced. All of that to say that childhood trauma and some very terrible things that happened to me that's not supposed to happen to little girls, especially in church.
Yeah.
You know, all of that mixed and mingled on about the time in my life when I had already established a career, had already had gold records and platinum records, and then suddenly I was diagnosed clinically depressed, which I thought was probably the end of my Christian market career. Wow. And I found myself in rehab. I found myself in a psychiatric hospital. I was really in a mess. All that to say, depression became a friend. It's not a friend I always like, but depression is the gift that keeps on giving. And in that whole journey, I learned that I can love God and honor Him and glorify Him and do my job because of who He is, not because of how I feel. But also in that journey, my brother had his journey as well. It also cost me financially a great sum. I had to take out a second mortgage on my home to afford a Christian-run facility to help save my life. Wow. And in Middle Tennessee, my brother and I, we decided that just doesn't need to be, especially for the body of Christ, and for our pastors' families, and for people who are desperately needing help through a lot of addictions and struggles and traumas and just the tough time of life anyway. And we founded a place called Branches Recovery Center, and we turned no one down. 5 years later, it's an up and running organization that has 5 licensed professional counselors, a psychiatrist on board, a doctor. We have incredible in-house therapies, and it's amazing. You know, I feel like one of those commercials and I am also a client. So it is just amazing to see. You know, and I love that the Christian market, for the lack of a better word, we've come a long way, baby,
right.
on that issue. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Laughing in the Dark, and really thinking it was going to be my goodbye kind of a book to the Christian industry. And there was a lot of Christian bookstores that weren't very friendly and didn't like it on the shelf, especially when I'm open in public about antidepressants and all the things I had to say. And I have always had my opinion. Mm-hmm. That's why I love my job. But it became so well received that it people started demanding it and asking for it. And what I thought would be the end of me has become a real resurgence. When you hit menopause, and let me give a lesson out there to the young girls. When you hit menopause,
yes,
it's a time for your body to slow down. And whatever going on nutritionally, whatever going on emotionally, physically, all those things are going to be compounded when your body slows down, and it gives your mind time to catch up.
Wow.
And your mind starts slowing down to capture or recapture some things you didn't deal with. And, wow. Plus, I always think menopause has got to be the greatest evangelistic tool. Because if you don't know Jesus before menopause, you're probably going to kill someone.
Well, a little therapy there. Let me come back before we take a break. Let me ask you this before we take a break, Chonda. How did you manage a bipolar dad, your parents divorcing, and you going through depression? Where was God?
I don't know. I've asked him that many times. I think he was on the aisle 3 at Walmart. He was in the room. He was in the building. But, and that's a wonderful question. And what's so great about God is we can ask him. And sometimes he'll give you an answer and sometimes he doesn't. Same place where God was when his son was on the cross. He probably was standing right there sobbing. Because in this world, we will have troubles and tribulation and tough stuff. And God promised to walk with us, not to walk us out of it or keep us out of it. Where was God in the garden when Eve tried to pick supper for her husband and the whole world fell apart? Mm-hmm. That's why I don't cook.
Your husband's probably thankful.
That's exactly right. That first little dinner there for her husband didn't go well. Yeah. So I told my you're on your own. You find your own food. All that to say, God is there in it. And I think we have been, sometimes in the past in the church world, we've done a disservice by trying to sell God, for the lack of a better word, in a really, really fine and fancy light. Come to know Jesus and your whole world's going to be really great. That's a lie. Wow. Come to know Jesus so that your eternity is taken care of. But in this world, we're still going to struggle and we're going to have tough times. Now, you can either do those struggles with a God on your side that gives you the strength to do more than you ever dreamed or imagined, or you can do it without. But the choice is still yours. And had we not had the choice, that would be a bigger deprivation than thinking that we went through all this alone.
Well, Chonda, let me take a quick break. We'll be right back. Chonda Pierce is with us today, and like I said, she needs no introduction. And yet, behind the smile is an incredible story, an incredible ministry, and an empathy that few could ever experience. And I think that's why so many, Chonda, relate to you. So we'll talk to her and a whole lot more coming up in just a few moments. Okay, we're back with Chonda Pierce, and she is also going to host the Dove Awards this year, coming up just really in a couple of days, and I think that would be a hoot.
Oh, my. I'm more nervous about the dress issue than anything. If that doesn't show I still have vanity that the Lord needs to heal me from. If I really loved Jesus, I would just wear sweatpants and tennis, But it is kind of funny, and if I could just be so bold, as if I'm not. Yeah. I'm very open and vocal and opinionated about stuff. Yeah. And so the very fact that the Dove Awards invited me, that's very That's very merciful of them.
Yeah.
What great Christians they are.
Yeah.
Only because I have always said, I say it about myself, how weird that I'm trying to make a living glorifying God, but my name's on the CDs, the DVDs, the tickets.
Yeah.
You work so hard to get a chance to do interviews like this, to get your name on the marquee so that you can get 3,000 people in their seats and have the opportunity to look at them and go, by the way, this isn't about me. There's something really weird about that. And I've said there's something really strange that in a group of people who work really hard to let their craft and their music uplift the name of God, and yet we're going to get in the room and give trophies to each other. There's a little something odd about that. At the same time, I went last year, and I still think there was a miscommunication somewhere. I thought I was going to go do something funny with Sherry Shepherd, my good friend. Yeah. Bring a little comedy to the night, be a presenter or something like that. And then I was going to go home. I got stuck there the whole night and trying to entertain people between the set changes and all that. I'd never done anything like that, never heard of anything like that. Just did it, And evidently, I didn't tick off everybody because they invited me back.
Oh, that's wonderful. Absolutely. Well, congratulations. That's coming up in about a week or so, or actually next week. Hey, tell us about your latest project. I'm Kind of a Big Deal.
That's exactly right. And if you can't say it, who will?
Yeah. Well,
my mother's
your mother
kind of getting old. She doesn't tell me I'm great anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of a tongue in cheek. I went through the last, in my comedy and all my videos have been about, have been about me. Just where I am, what I'm doing, how I look at things, how I see things. And in the oddest way, I've always gotten the premise, and I don't know what other stand-up comedians do, but I've always gotten the premise or what it is I want to say, what I want the night to be about. I always get that in my head first. Now, I'd like to call it divine inspiration, but God may not want anything to do with any of this. But I always get that idea first, and then I start writing backwards to kind of support that thesis or support that premise, and that's the way my career has been forever. And in the last year or so, I got a call from a guy that said, how do you have 4 platinum comedy projects and no one in Hollywood has ever heard of you?
Right.
And I said, well, if you've never been to a Baptist potluck, you wouldn't know me. and you can't say potluck in Los Angeles. It means something totally different now. All that to say, that you can't take a covered dish to a hoedown. That's a whole nother issue.
There you go.
So all that to say, I've been through the last 18 months moments like that when my faith has been pushed up against kind of a dark place or rubbing elbows with the big dogs and the mainstream, whatever they call that. And all of a sudden you're looked at a little odd. I found myself on a USO tour with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. That'll really make your ego. When you share a room with size 2 pom-poms, I don't care what the barracks look like. It's just not pleasant. I think, and the girl who emceed the show was on Playboy, so we had so much in common.
Yeah.
By the time I get home, I need a machine gun. It was just, it's just those moments. And I collected them along the way till all of a sudden you're crying out, wait a minute. I am a child of the living God. Mm-hmm. The King of Kings is my daddy. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that. I think that's kind of like the Dove Awards. I think there comes a time when we say, we're children of the King of the universe. The Creator gave us a little bit of creativity. Mm-hmm. We're kind of a big deal. And that way it's okay to pat each other on the back and let's share a trophy or two, or, let's laugh about our humanity and crack up about the material that we get. But let's never forget that the one who created us looks at us as if we are perfection, even now in our imperfection. And so that's always kind of, that's where inspiration comes. And then you just cross your fingers and hope it's funny. And that you can pay your bill.
how did you discover that when you were going through therapy? How did you discover that you were a big deal to God when you're in the middle of therapy?
You know, it's a lesson. It's a life lesson. Life lessons don't mean you learned it. It means you're learning it throughout your whole life. There's some days I really get that. There are others I wake up and look at myself in the mirror and go, oh my goodness, how does this man stay married to me for 30 years? You know, or sometimes I wake up and look at him and go, oh, 30, that's enough. You know, it is, it's something that we're always having to teach ourselves and tell ourselves. And I don't know, outside of knowing whose you are, I don't know that there's any armchair psychology that can seal that for you. I used to always say, I wish somebody would hypnotize me. Tell me I'm great and then wake me up, you know, because it takes sometimes a lot of nerve, not only just to do my job, but to navigate in this world. We've got kids struggling with bullies. I never heard of that when I was a kid. I mean, there was like a mean kid in school every now and then, but our kids are going through stuff. All that to say, there are a few little moments in my therapies that came along that had to replay or rewrite the wrong that was told to me. I can remember when I used to tell this as a joke all the time, when I was about 3 or 4, standing at the water fountain at church, and 2 sweet saints of the church slipped up behind me and whispered to one another, this is one of our preacher's kids. She's not very P-R-E-T-T-Y. And I turned around and said, no, but I'm real S-M-A-R-T. And I have told that for years. The truth of that, the punchline, I wrote. I didn't really turn around and say I'm really S-M-A-R-T. I just kind of turned around and smiled and ran and told my mama, Sister so-and-so and Mrs. Big Hair, they think I'm ugly. And that, I didn't realize the scar that had left. I didn't realize that maybe the louder I started becoming as a young person, the more I was hurting, or the tougher I wanted to be. That means the more tender those scars were inside. I didn't relate all of that until Christian, wonderful psychiatrists and help and counselors, they begin to unravel some of those stories, and you learn some things. And so I wrote those ladies a letter. You know, they're dead and gone. You know, I wish they were still living. They need to hear that story. Vengeance is mine, you know.
Yeah.
But all that to say, I wrote them a letter. There are therapies that you can do. Yeah. I remember one of the therapies was go to Build-A-Bear and pick out a bear that represented you, that looked like you, the you wanted to be. I can remember taking my daughter to the Medieval Times restaurant, and she was chosen at the end of the battle to be the little princess. And I remember watching that king crown my little girl at this restaurant, had nothing to do with the Lord Jesus, and Jesus whispers in my ear, see how that king is looking so tenderly at that little knobby-kneed, braces girl. That's how God looks at you.
Let me squeeze in here, Chonda, take one more break, come back. This is so fascinating, and I want you to speak to the fact that we're living in such a chaotic world. We need moments of laughter, but it's also an opportunity to really witness to a lot of hurting and confused people today. And Chonda Pierce is with us, and what a hoot, to say the least. And her new project is out. I'm Kinda of a Big Deal. There's a picture of it there on the screen. We'll be right back with Chonda Pierce right after this. Well, what a delight to have with us today Chonda Pierce, and you have heard her, and maybe you've had the opportunity to see her on television. We have played her audio CDs on Dove Radio for years, and today she's with us on the Dove TV, and she has a new project out called I'm Kinda of a Big Deal. There's a picture of it there on the screen, and let me encourage you to get a copy of that. She ministers in a very special way. It's called humor. She has a merry heart. And yet behind the smile, there's been a price that has been paid that she has gone through, her and her brother and her family. And I've always said, Chonda, whatever God saves you from or brings you through, He usually turns you around and makes you a minister too, and you're a living example of that. As we're going into the break, have you ever seen such hurting people ever in America as we are today?
No. And I always... I can remember when I was like 12 and 13, my grandmother watching the news and going, I just don't know why the Lord doesn't come back tomorrow. It can't get any worse. And I look at the news and if she was living, I would tell her it can, and it did. You know, it is, and also, I don't know if you feel this way. I feel not only is it some tough stories that we hear, and that, you know, for these shows like Law and Order and stuff like that are really cool and fascinating. They take their premises from the headlines. So, you know, if that's not a sad state that the world is in, I don't know what is. When our late night crime, you know, stories aren't having to be made up anymore. I mean, it's just real. And the sad thing is, I have been sensing more and more a great divide. We are pulling more and more apart. You know, we survived this horrible, horrendous prejudice called you know, in the 60s, and at segregation and all that went on with that. And we still struggle in that area greatly. But we survived that. But now we're at a day and age when all that's cropping up again. We're not only divided in skin color, but ethnicity, and we're divided in political view, and we're divided in our economic status. And we have forgotten that under the umbrella, we are all American. And especially when you start sensing those kinds of divisions in the body of Christ, that's doubly sad. And so you're right. Some levity somewhere is a really nice thing. And especially if we can take that art, that gift of humor, wrap it up in a way that begins to make a little bit of a point and chisel away at some of those divisions, man, wouldn't that be great? And boy, who was smart enough to think of that? God. Duh. You know,
how do you handle the description Christian comedian?
Like that.
Oh, okay.
I know that people, because you don't say, I am a Christian insurance man, you know.
Yeah,
that would be kind of an oxymoron, because if you're a Christian insurance man, don't you think you kind of have eternity all settled anyway? You know, but you know, I am a Christian house painter. I'm a Christian lawn guy. I'm a Christian secretary. It does drive me crazy a little bit. And at the same time, we are a ratings kind of a world. We want to know what shelf to put you on in a bookstore. We want to know if you're a G, PG, X, Y, or Z. Yeah. You know, we want to know what category you fall in. And I always like to say I'm a Christian. That means I'm a Christian mom, a Christian wife. It doesn't change for what it is I'm doing for a living. I happen to make a living as a stand-up comedian. Now, because of my material and because of some of my stories or because of my background, you know, I didn't know a comedy club existed when I first started out, and that's the truth. You know, I did my comedy on the Grand Ole Opry. I was like, woohoo! My mother hated it because they served beer at the Grand Ole Opry, you know. But it is just it's just where I started out. Now that I'm kind of once in a while in those arenas and in those areas where, you know, the comedy club scene is now cropping up in my life, I always crack up and I go, look, you think you're funny. You come make a bunch of Baptist deacons laugh on a Sunday morning. We'll see how funny you are. You know, and so it is an odd thing. I know it's odd for people to hear Christian comedy, because I remember a guy on a plane asking me, so what do you do, tell jokes about Jesus? And I'm like, no, I tell jokes about dumb sinners. But that wasn't a very evangelistic, so I kind of dropped that. It is, I don't know where the name or the ideas came from, but it's the same thing that you know, Stephen Curtis Chapman is a Christian music artist.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting is you've made fun of yourself, your background, and the church, which is all in very good taste with the underlying message.
I'm going to burn in hell, probably. No.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think we need.
I'm either a borderline heretic, or maybe I am a pretty open and honest Christian.
Well, I think the latter, and because while the mouth is open and people are really laughing at themselves, you do get God's love into the message every time.
Yeah, and I hope so. Because I am too old and tired to leave my house for any other reason.
Oh, Chonda, what's next for you? Do you have any plans? I mean, what's God telling you?
Oh, you know, I hesitate to blame it all on God in case I'm hearing the wrong thing. All that to say, the Doves have been on my bucket list for a long time. I used to go to the Dove Awards early on in my career just because I was a fan of Christian music, and I was dating some songwriter. And, and then my husband and I are huge fans of Christian music. And so that's kind of been on my radar. And I would see people that hosted it and go, oh, man, at that moment, he should have said this. And so I've kind of had that on my radar for a long time. So it's kind of a personal thing for me. But all comedians say, oh, the next thing would be television or sitcom and all of that. And I got to be in a couple of movies this year, and that was a lot of fun. And now I'm in the middle of a movie deal, and we start shooting in a couple of months, and thus the diet.
Wow.
And it's about me.
Well, I got to tell you, I feel very, very privileged because you were on the Dove TV before you were on the Dove Awards.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have arrived.
That's right. And so everything I've said about the Dove Awards, let's go repeat it.
Hey, thanks for being with us. Can we get you back?
Absolutely. Y'all are so nice, and thanks for this opportunity.
Oh, what a hoot. Thanks for all that you do, and just go ahead, wear your sweat outfit out there on the stage.
Okay, good.
And I think you ought some really wild colored tennis shoes to go with it or something,
It'd be a lot cheaper. I'll be wearing TJ as in TJ Maxx.
Okay, there you go. Hey, God bless you. Take care of yourself.
Thanks.
Say bye-bye. Well, that's our program today. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.